They laughed when his name came up, like a joke being passed around the table. It wasn't just laughter, though. It was disgust, like the very idea of a human attending a tribunal on Vrexen soil was insulting. Some of them didn't even bother hiding it. The chamber was cold. Not by temperature, but by tone. Stone-gray walls, long shadows cast from the high-hung torches. 12 species filled the circle. Delegates from across the galactic conquered. Feathers, scales, silicon skin, and glowing pupils. The elite, the self-proclaimed civilized ones, and in the center of it all, restrained by electromagnetic cuffs that flickered every few seconds, stood him. Human. Unarmed. Slight limp in his right leg. Face bruised. Jaw clenched. But not afraid. Not even close. He hadn't said a word since they dragged him in. Not that they wanted him to. This wasn't a hearing. It was a show. They'd already decided his fate before he was even arrested. A living example to remind every other race what happens when a human crosses the line. Because the ban had been clear. No humans beyond Gate 12. No humans in conquered territory. No humans in outer alliances. Period. They were too dangerous, they said. Too primitive. Too emotional. Too unpredictable. And when this one, he refused to say his name to them, was caught on Garen 6, deep in restricted space, wearing nothing but combat rags and a shattered comlink on his chest, the council nearly cheered. Finally, a human they could make an example out of. One of the bigger delegates, a bloated amphibian with translucent skin, waddled to the front and spat into a cup. The council requests the immediate verdict. This creature has nothing to offer but lies. His presence is a mockery to interstellar law. The others murmured agreement. Some didn't even look his way. Others smirked. A few squinted in mock curiosity, as if dissecting him with their eyes. But then the room shifted. Literally. The room's lights flickered. The atmosphere dimmed. A whirring sound came from above. Then silence. A tall, black-robed official stepped forward, holding a data slate. "I have been ordered," the voice boomed across the chamber, "to play intercepted footage recovered from the wreckage on Garen 6. The smugness started to fade. Just a bit. "No such footage exists. The creature came alone," barked another delegate. The official ignored him and slid the slate into the projection core. The room darkened fully. Then, the screen came alive. Timestamp 0314 hours. Location Garen 6 Outpost, Delta 9 snow, screaming winds, a broken tower half buried in ash. Then, movement, a human, the same man now standing in chains. His helmet was cracked, blood running down the side of his face. He carried a child. No, not human. A little Tolari girl, her arm mangled, crying. Behind them, fire lit the sky, and shadows of enemy drones hovered like vultures. He ducked behind rubble, checked her vitals, whispered something. She nodded. And then he stood up. Alone. He grabbed a plasma rifle from a fallen soldier. Not even a standard-issue Concord model. This one was patched, jury-rigged, wires exposed. Then came the drones. 6. Maybe 7. He didn't run. He moved like a ghost. No, like something else. Something colder. Every step was calculated, every shot exact. His shoulder took a hit. He didn't flinch. He dropped one drone, then another, using debris as cover, dragging his left leg slightly but still pressing forward. He wasn't saving himself. He was buying time for the girl. More drones came. He picked up another weapon, then another. No fear, just grit, fire, fury. The screen went black. The chamber was dead silent. No one looked at each other. No one moved. The amphibian delegate tried to speak, but choked on his own spit. A Saren diplomat whispered, "That outpost was supposed to be wiped. No survivors. We saw no escape pods." The official nodded. Because he stayed behind. And the child? a whisper from the shadows. She's alive, currently being treated in a neutral zone. She requested to testify. The man finally lifted his head, eyes bloodshot but unblinking, and then he spoke. Just one sentence. You banned us because you feared what we might do, alone. The weight of his words landed like a hammer. No theatrics, no pleading. And for the first time in decades, the room full of alien superiority couldn't speak. Because the footage hadn't just shown them a human, it showed them why banning them didn't work. Because humans didn't need permission to matter, they just needed a reason. The silence didn't last long. It shattered like glass under the weight of pride, fear, and 1,000 years of political rot. This is manipulation, one of the Yashkari delegates hissed, his multiple eyes blinking in chaotic patterns. It proves nothing. We all know how humans exploit emotional leverage. Another voice cut through, higher pitched, trembling with the kind of arrogance only cowardice can birth. He violated the Treaty of Sentient Preservation by crossing into Garen 6. He's a criminal. The footage is irrelevant. But no one could look at the screen. The last image burned into their minds. The human, face bloodied, holding the rifle like it was part of his body, not a weapon, but a will. The official stood still, hands behind his back. Would you like me to replay it? He asked, voice cold and even. No one answered. The man in chains still hadn't moved. His breathing was steady, controlled. Every inch of his body language screamed discipline, a hard-earned kind, forged under chaos, not protocol. He didn't care about what they thought. He didn't need them to understand. The little girl mattered. That was all. But somewhere deep in his eyes, behind the blood, the bruises, the ragged cuts, was something else. Resentment. Not born of vengeance. No, it was older, sharper. It was contempt. He had been here before, in some other form. Maybe not this exact chamber, maybe not in chains, but in boardrooms, on war fronts, at meetings where human dignity was always up for negotiation. This time, he wasn't playing their game. You want his name now, don't you? The official asked quietly, addressing the room. The question slithered through the silence like a knife. His name is not relevant, a four-armed delegate muttered. He's a specimen of a banned species. No identity is needed for the sentence. The human chuckled. Not loud, not mocking, just tired. As if even their cowardice was predictable now. The council didn't like being laughed at, especially not by someone who should be begging. You people really believe you're still in control, the man said, finally stepping forward within the boundary of his restraints. Still holding the leash on something you barely understand. Watch your tone, creature, one barked. Creature? He repeated, raising an eyebrow. You watched me fight off your drones. Watched me bleed to protect a child that wasn't even my species. And you still think you're better because you wear robes and hide behind laws no one believes in anymore? The official didn't stop him. No one did. Somewhere deep in the shadows of the tribunal, a soft voice spoke. It belonged to an old Divaran diplomat, once a respected neutral species before they were bullied into alignment with the conquered. She asked for him, the diplomat said, voice wavering. The girl, she cried when they separated her from him, bit the medics. Refused to speak until she saw him breathing again. No one responded. She called him her shield, not soldier, not savior, just shield. It was the kind of thing that shouldn't have meant anything. But in that cold, calculated room full of delegates and data, it landed like a damn warhead. Because shields weren't weapons. They weren't used to conquer. They were used to protect. And somehow, that made him more dangerous. Show them the next clip, the man said quietly, without looking at the official. The chamber shifted again. Another file loaded. Timestamp. 0329 hours. Same location. A scream echoed through the air, mechanical and layered, like something inhuman was tearing through metal and bone. The human was limping now, one arm nearly useless. But he was dragging a wounded ally, a species none of the delegates recognized. Maybe extinct, maybe still hidden in the unknown sectors. He set the creature down, created a makeshift barricade, then, without hesitation, pulled 2 enemy drones toward him by baiting them with a flare. They came fast. He moved faster. But this time, he didn't survive unscathed. The footage showed him getting hit. Hard. Plasma bolt to the side. His body slammed into a broken column. He didn't get up for several seconds. Then, barely conscious, he crawled toward a communications relay, wired a piece of his own armor into the uplink, and pressed a button with blood-slick fingers. Transmission sent. Location pinged. Evac signal fired. Then, blackness. When the lights returned, no one spoke. That kind of resilience, it wasn't honorable, it wasn't noble, it was terrifying, because it wasn't based on hope or glory, it was deliberate sacrifice. The kind that made rebellions spark, the kind that made statues fall. The human turned toward the assembly. "You banned us," he said, each word sharp and slow. "Because we weren't controllable, not because we were violent, not because we were primitive, but because we didn't ask for your permission to matter. You destroy worlds in the name of order, strip planets dry and call it diplomacy. And when we say no, when we fight back, suddenly we're monsters." He stepped closer to the edge of his cell field. It shimmered slightly, warning him to stop. "I'm not here to beg. I'm here because you needed a public villain, a warning." He leaned forward. "But the galaxy's been watching this trial, haven't they? You made it public, wanted to show what happens when a human defies the ban. When a creature forgets his place." One of the delegates started to object. He kept going. "Well, the footage showed more than you wanted, didn't it?" He straightened up. His eyes scanned the room, one by one. Cold. Unforgiving. "You saw what one human can do when the system fails. Now imagine 1,000, 1,000,000, not coming with ships or armies, just will, just the refusal to stay erased." The Deveran diplomat stood up, slowly, carefully. "This tribunal needs time to deliberate." "Too late," the human said. "The girl already sent the footage. It's gone viral across 3 neutral systems." Eyes widened. "You didn't think she was just some wounded child, did you? Her species developed biolink tech at birth. She recorded everything." Murmurs, then shouting. "Shut it down! Cut the feed! She's an ambassador's daughter," he cut in, voice rising for the first time. "And now she's your witness. You tried to kill her. You ignored the distress beacons. You sent drones instead of help. And when a human showed up, you called him a threat." He looked directly at the council's presiding judge, a cold-blooded, smug-faced Thakar who had made speeches about human unpredictability in nearly every galactic summit. "You think you've buried us, but all you did was plant us." Then he stepped back and sat down. It was done. The room exploded into chaos. Delegates screamed. Some left. Others demanded immediate sentencing. A few just sat there, blinking, uncertain what the galaxy would look like tomorrow, because the ban wasn't just about humans. It was about fear. And that fear just got exposed. The corridor outside the tribunal chamber was already crawling with silent watchers. Not guards, not enforcers, but officials, whispers in robes, nervous aides, quiet messengers holding encrypted slates, people who had come to witness a humiliation, and instead got a prophecy. News spreads fast in space, but fear spreads faster. The moment the second video file went live across the neutral networks, it became more than evidence. It became a question, one that made every senator, ambassador, and prime minister across the outer sectors suddenly stop breathing. What if the ban was never about safety, and worse, what if humans were never gone? Just waiting, watching, getting ready. Inside the holding cell beneath the tribunal, the man sat on a bench made of cold alloy, wrists still cuffed behind his back. He was alone. No guards, no cameras, no lights, except for a flickering sensor strip that buzzed above him every few seconds, like it couldn't decide whether to function or die. He could hear the tremors of chaos above, not actual tremors, but that silence between raised voices when people start realizing the walls are thinner than they hoped. He'd been in worse places. Far worse. This cell was a luxury by comparison. But it wasn't comfort he needed. It was time. And they were giving it to him by panicking. He smiled to himself. The footage had done its job. It didn't matter if they accepted the truth now. It didn't matter if they tried to spin it, suppress it, twist it. The message was already out, and the people would do what people always did when the cracks showed in a polished lie. They'd dig. Footsteps, 2 sets. He didn't look up until the door opened with a hydraulic hiss. The official from earlier entered first, tall, silent, still expressionless, followed by someone new. Someone dressed in the black and silver of internal intelligence. Now that was interesting. The newcomer was a tall insectoid, slender, with antennae that curved slightly inward like horns. He moved with a precision that reeked of arrogance. Intelligence officers always walked like they were carrying secrets no one else deserved to know. "You've caused quite a problem," the officer said, not even looking at him. "I'm good at problems," the human replied calmly. The officer didn't smile. "You know what your broadcast did?" "I know exactly what it did. You're just figuring it out now." "You destabilized an entire sector. 2 border worlds have pulled back their conquered support. The girl's species filed a formal war crime charge against the tribunal." The human raised an eyebrow. "Wow, all that from one creature." The insectoid leaned in closer, his compound eyes unblinking. "You're not a hero. You're a virus, a walking infection. Every time your kind gets involved, things break." "That's the difference between your kind and mine," the man replied. "You break when something goes wrong. We break things on purpose when they're already wrong." There was a long silence. Then the intelligence officer laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You really believe there's some future for your people out here? The ban's not going away. Too many planets fear you." The human shrugged. "Fear is a better start than pity. You'll never walk free again. I wasn't free before. I was just better at hiding it." The door hissed again. A message was passed into the room. The officer opened it. His eyes twitched. He turned away. "Prepare him for transfer." The official, who hadn't spoken a word since entering, finally looked at the man. And this time, his stare lingered. It wasn't pity. It wasn't disgust. It was doubt. And doubt, in the conquered, was a death sentence. The cuffs came off. They didn't even try to sedate him. Above, the council was unraveling. One by one, alliances were fraying. The outer rings were starting to vote for secession. The Thakar delegation had walked out. The Vrexan coalition demanded an emergency lockdown. And the Deveran delegation, once the quietest species in the room, was now calling for a full war crimes investigation into conquered drone policies. And all of this, every conversation, every vote, every breath of panic was being streamed, leaked, and magnified across the neutral grids. The footage had gone beyond viral. It had become doctrine. In underground forums across frontier planets, Humans who had lived in hiding for decades were showing their faces again. In rebel cells, soldiers wore patches with the word SHIELD stitched across them. In mercenary crews, old Earth tech was being pulled out of storage and powered up again. Unregulated, uncontrolled, something was waking up. And in the center of it all was a man with no name, just a face bloodied by sacrifice and lit by the fire of something the conquered couldn't define. Human defiance. The transport was quiet. 2 guards, no small talk. They took him through level 12, down into the sub-chambers. He knew where they were taking him. The pit. It was where they sent people who weren't just prisoners. It was where they sent symbols. He didn't mind. They were doing exactly what he wanted. The more they panicked, the more they exposed themselves. They opened the gate. The air was damp, salted like they pumped the humidity in just to make it uncomfortable. The cell was deep, circular, no windows. Just one reinforced door and a narrow vent in the ceiling. The kind of place you put someone when you wanted them to disappear. The officer waited until the guards left. Then he leaned in and said something he hadn't expected. "They're hunting others like you now." The human's face went cold. "What others?" "Other humans, survivors, refugees, kids born outside Earth jurisdiction. Your little rebellion sparked a manhunt." The man said nothing. His fists clenched slowly. "They're calling it a preemptive purge, trying to eliminate the spark before it turns into fire." "How many?" The officer hesitated. Then, "Thousands, maybe more. Some planets are turning them in for rewards. Others are executing on the spot." The human's jaw tightened. He stood up, walked to the center of the room, looked up at the vent shaft above. Then he spoke, not to the officer, but to the room, to whatever bugs and sensors they had watching him. "You think this ends with me?" he said. "I'm not the symbol. I'm just the signal." He turned back. "You came all this way to tell me that?" The officer nodded once. "Why?" The insectoid's eyes flickered. "Because I used to believe the ban was right," he said. "But after today..." He trailed off. Then he slid something through the slot in the wall. A chip. Unmarked, untraceable. 10 seconds of blackout, you'll know what to do with it." Then he left. The door hissed shut, and for the first time since arriving in this cursed place, the man was truly alone. He sat back down. He waited. 8 hours later, power flickered. Cameras shut down. The hallway lights blinked once, twice, then died. Inside his cell, the man slid the chip into a groove beneath the bench. His fingers moved like he'd done this before. He had. The wall lit up with a soft pulse, just once. He didn't smile. He stood, and above him, through the vent, a soft clink echoed. A small device dropped in. It clicked twice. The cuffs fell off. The vent opened. He climbed without hesitation. Not because he wanted freedom, but because someone had to light the next fire. The shaft was narrow, vertical, and old, long since forgotten by the engineers who'd built the tribunal's lower cells. If they remembered at all, they must have assumed the system had been sealed long ago. But like everything built by fear and arrogance, it wasn't sealed, just ignored. He climbed. No grunting, no wasted movement. His hands bled with each pull, catching on jagged metal and corroded seams, but he didn't stop. He didn't curse, didn't slow. Pain had long stopped being a deterrent. It was just a tax for doing the hard things. He reached a hatch 40 meters up, locked, manual override. Perfect. That meant no AI oversight. No alarms tripped, not yet. He reached into the utility pouch left for him in the vent. A strip of synthetic explosive putty, pre-rigged with a quiet disintegration charge. Low yield, directional, non-lethal. perfect for doors. He pressed it against the hatch, punched the code, and stepped back. Tsh, no boom, just dust, metal falling away like sugar. He pushed through. A maintenance hall, no lights, no cameras, no sound. He moved like a shadow. Every footstep was deliberate, every corner cleared before he took it. And then, voices. Faint. 2. Protocol lockdown. They haven't confirmed if it's a malfunction or sabotage. Keep checking the lower ducts. Use drones this time. He pressed flat against the wall. A drone whirred past overhead, scanning the corridor. He waited. Counted. 5 seconds. Pause. Scan. Turn left. They were running standard quadrant sweeps. Lazy. Efficient only against dumb threats. He wasn't dumb. He timed the next patrol, sprinted across the intersection, and slipped into an old filtration control chamber. Dust. Obsolete terminals. Cracked tiles. No one had been here in years. Perfect. He went to the far wall, where the emergency panel used to be. Ripped it open. Inside, a weapon, not a rifle, not a bomb, a packet, small, black, triangular, marked with a symbol few in the galaxy remembered. Old Earth military encryption. He opened it. Inside was a data shard, a single-use burst transmitter, and a name, Delta 4, activation code, Shepard. He stared at it for a moment. Not in confusion, in recognition. They were still out there. His people. Hidden. Scattered. Ghosts with scars. And they'd been waiting for this. He loaded the shard into a terminal. No password needed. The system had been preloaded. Someone, years ago, had prepared for this exact moment. He typed 2 words. Wake up. The shard glowed, pulsed twice, and then the signal went out. Across the galaxy, in fringe sectors and underground systems, the pulse hit. Dead relays lit up. Abandoned satellites flickered online. Old Earth tech, clunky, unreliable, obsolete by Concord standards, suddenly became the most dangerous thing in the stars. In a debris field orbiting a forgotten moon, a scavenger ship received the signal. The captain, ex-UNMC, dishonorably discharged, face burned from orbital artillery, stood without a word. He walked into his cabin, opened a floor panel, and pulled out a sealed box marked with the same triangle. Delta 4. He keyed in the code. Shepard. Lights across the ship shifted red. A screen blinked to life. Asset activated. In a mercenary station on the edge of black space, an exobiologist checked her messages. One unread. No sender, no subject. Just 2 words. He's alive. She closed her eyes. Then walked to her lab, smashed a wall panel, and removed a weapon she swore she'd never touch again. In an underground colony 3 levels beneath a mining station, a child asked her father why everyone had suddenly stopped working. He didn't answer. He was staring at the old comms screen, at the face of a man he thought died 10 years ago. Broadcast replay. Footage. Garen 6. Caption. SHIELD. Back inside the tribunal complex, panic was quietly blooming. The power flickers had returned. Security feeds were glitching. The prison AI was stuck in loop diagnostics. And above ground, delegates were being pulled from the building. Emergency shuttles. Quiet convoys. Orders to leave the area under the guise of unexpected solar interference. It was a lie. Everyone knew it. The tribunal was compromised. And they still didn't know how deep. In the command center, a Concord officer screamed into the comms. "Someone cut internal tracking. We can't isolate his signal." "He's just one man," a general yelled. "No," said the communications officer. "He isn't." The general frowned. "What does that mean?" The comms tech turned, pale. "We're picking up old Earth ciphers. Dozens. Bursting in from dead channels. No origin points. No identifiable servers." "Someone explain to me what the hell is happening." The tech swallowed hard, then whispered, "They're not dead." In the darkness below, the man kept moving. He wasn't running. He was navigating. The map in his head wasn't exact, but it was close. He'd been here before, not in this exact place, but in enough like it to know how the conquered built their guts. They were efficient, predictable. Security cores always had 3 exits. Always had an emergency override behind the coolant nodes. Always kept the primary server uplinks in a vertical formation to reduce microgravity interference. He moved through them like a scalpel, and then he reached the server core. 3 guards. 1 drone. He didn't hesitate. He dropped smoke, custom blend, loaded with infrared disruption particles. Moved through it like a wraith. 2 guards went down before they even realized they were being attacked. The 3rd fired. Wild. Panicked. He let the plasma burn graze his shoulder, caught the man's arm, and drove his elbow into his throat. The guard dropped. He dragged them into the corner, took a weapon, then started working on the server. He wasn't there to erase anything. He was there to download it all. Every conversation, every vote, every recording. Every document that proved the ban on humans was never about peace. It was about fear, conquest, and preemptive control. He fed the data into the shard. Time, 4 minutes. He stood over the console and waited. Blood trickled down his arm. He didn't care. He looked up at the camera and smiled. Because they were watching, and they were afraid. He didn't need a weapon to fight them. He just needed the truth, and the will to carry it through. Above ground, the entire tribunal complex went dark. Across the galaxy, the feed returned. But this time, it wasn't the footage from Garen 6. It was everything. Proof of falsified reports. Audio of internal conversations discussing human containment as a long-term solution. Video of conquered scientists testing biological weapons on orphaned human colonies after Earth fell silent. And then, his face. The man they'd chained, the man they mocked, staring into the lens and saying, "You tried to erase us. Now the galaxy will remember why that failed." The broadcast reached over 230 systems in the first 2 minutes. It couldn't be stopped, because the conquered had built their network on arrogance, a centralized grid designed for efficiency, not resilience. And now it was being used against them. From the pit, the man walked upward. Security was gone. The guards had fled. He reached the upper levels without firing another shot. And when he stepped outside into the cold air of the surface platform, the stars above him weren't just silent. They were listening. Because everywhere across those stars, old enemies were standing up again. Not to invade, not to conquer, but to stand for the first time without permission. The stars had never looked so quiet. Above the tribunal compound, the sky shimmered with the soft trails of escape shuttles disappearing into orbit. Each one carried a delegate, an official, or a coward in robes, fleeing not from war, but from accountability. Below, the complex was hollow. The man walked through the aftermath like a ghost in his own grave. No alarms, no guards, just the smell of scorched electronics and fear hanging thick in the air. His boots echoed on marble that used to feel untouchable. That illusion had cracked. He reached the outer landing pad. 2 small ships sat idle. One was a Concord patrol skiff, armed but traceable, useless. The other was older, rusted in spots, serial number burned off, Terran design. Perfect. He stepped aboard. The cockpit lights flickered to life, like it recognized him. He dropped into the pilot chair, tapped the console, and patched the chip into the nav core. Broadcast complete. The system confirmed. Signal reach, 261 systems. Civil unrest reports, 74 confirmed, 19 escalating. He didn't smile, didn't celebrate. There was still work to do. The map loaded. Dots pulsed red across the screen, not conquered strongholds, but nodes. Places where humans had once been, where they'd been pushed out, buried, erased. And now, they were lighting up. Responses were coming in from across the black. We received your signal. We never left. We have weapons. Tell us where. He is alive. Delta 3 requesting activation protocol. He stared at them for a moment. Let the weight of it settle. Then he sent out a single message to all nodes. Stand by. Uprising begins within 96 hours. Shield formation is a go. The reply came in less than 3 seconds. Copy, for Earth. The Conquered called it a communication disruption. That's how they tried to spin the footage leak. A glitch, a manipulated feed, maybe even a psyop run by rogue AIs. But deep down, they knew. They knew this wasn't sabotage. It was a reckoning. Systems began falling out of alignment, not with violence, not yet, but with silence. Planets stopped returning Conquered calls. Border stations stopped requesting fuel deliveries. Neutral governments refused to enforce the human ban. Some even started sheltering them. The Conquered panicked. They sent peacekeepers, enforcers, wrote emergency resolutions and fed them through their media networks. But it didn't matter. The truth had teeth now, and it was biting hard. 3 days after the tribunal collapse, on a mining colony in Sector Row 7, the first shot was fired. A patrol squad arrived to inspect for unauthorized life forms. Their scanners lit up on 3 individuals, unregistered DNA, elevated body heat, heart rates accelerated. Human. The commander ordered extraction. The miners refused. Said the humans were their workers. Said they'd done more to fix the machines in 3 days than the Conquered had done in 10 years. One soldier tried to pull a rifle. A pickaxe broke his faceplate. The squad never left the colony. That footage went viral in less than 2 hours. The man was already moving. His ship, a gutted Earth frigate retrofitted with stealth plating, had reached the edge of Sector Vorn's space, where old Earth satellites used to orbit a planet now considered dead. But it wasn't. He landed in silence. Dust kicked up beneath the thrusters. The landing bay was half buried under rust and ash. He stepped out, walked through the empty corridors of what had once been a refugee center, now abandoned. Or so the Conquered thought. He knocked once on a wall panel, then again, then 3 short taps. A light blinked. Then the wall hissed open. She was waiting, gray in her hair, eyes sharper than any weapon he'd seen since the old days. A scar ran across her temple, but her voice was steel. "You're late," she said. "Power cut," he replied. She let out a dry laugh. "Still making jokes. Thought they'd beat that out of you." "They tried." She stepped aside. He entered the hideout. Dozens of them. Men. Women. Not just human, but sympathizers. Outcasts from other species. People whose lives had been trampled by the Conquered's golden boots. They all turned to face him, and he said nothing. He just took the shard out of his jacket, held it high, and plugged it into the central display. The footage played again. This time, not just the battle, but the documents, the secrets, the operations, the cover-ups. When it ended, the room was still. Then one man stepped forward, young, scarred, fire in his throat. "They hunted my brother like an animal, branded him a threat because he was born outside the lunar accords. He was 8. Another spoke, a woman with cybernetic arms. "They sterilized my entire crew after we smuggled human kids off an annexed world." A third. "I served in the Conquered Navy, watched them send drones to settlements that never fired a shot. I reported it, got labeled unstable. They wiped my record." More voices, more scars, more rage. He let them speak. And when they were done, he finally said, Then you know why I'm here. Someone in the back whispered, "Is this a rebellion?" He shook his head. "No, this is justice." They started calling themselves shields, not warriors, not rebels, not freedom fighters. Shields, because they weren't fighting to dominate. They were fighting to protect what the conquered tried to erase. And for the first time in generations, humans weren't scattered ghosts hiding from scanners. They were organizing. One cell became 10. 10 became 40. In the underground stations of Rexon 9, 1,000 unregistered humans gathered in the dark and swore allegiance. In the icy caverns of Theta Reach, a lost Earth battleship reactivated its core and joined the uprising. In orbit over neutral planet 7C, a Concord cruiser defected mid-flight, its captain sending one message before vanishing: "I remember Earth." The Concord responded the only way it knew how, with force. They sent black flag fleets into fringe systems, began bombing hot zones, droned entire agricultural colonies suspected of harboring shields. They arrested their own citizens, blocked comms, silenced the press. And all of it, every drop of it, was caught on camera. Because the shields had already infiltrated their feeds. There was no hiding anymore. Every crime became a spark. Every spark became a fire, and fire spreads. From the bridge of the stealth frigate, the man watched the map light up. He didn't revel in it. This wasn't vengeance, it wasn't revenge, it was consequence. He opened a secure channel. It routed through 17 dark nodes, no trace. Then a voice answered, aged, male, tired. "Is it time?" The man nodded. "It's time." "I never thought we'd come back." "We didn't. We were always here, they just got lazy." "What's your call, Commander?" He stared at the screen, then said the two words they'd waited decades to hear. Phase 1. He stood at the viewport, watching the stars rotate in silence. Below, the planet burned in slow motion, not from war, not yet, but from exodus. Phase 1 wasn't about fire, not in the beginning. It was about absence. Across conquered territory, human workers vanished. Mechanics, technicians, engineers, people no one had noticed until their machines stopped working. Dockyards stalled, refineries shut down. Entire transport systems collapsed because the insignificant labor force the conquered once despised had quietly walked away. Not a shot fired, just a message left behind. We don't serve tyrants. The conquered called it a labor disruption, then a desertion. Then, finally, they said the word they didn't want to say, rebellion. But this wasn't rebellion. It was a withdrawal. Every time they underestimated humanity, it cost them more than they realized. The commander, once nameless in chains, was no longer hiding in the dark. He didn't need to. The galaxy already knew his face. He was legend now. Not out of heroism, out of clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when a man says what everyone else is too scared to admit. They weren't trying to reclaim power. They were trying to reclaim worth. He moved through the war room of the retrofitted frigate, surrounded by people who had once been broken, and now stood taller than they ever had in their lives. No ranks. No medals, just purpose. At the main table, the maps flickered. A dozen planetary nodes glowed amber. Delta 3 cells activated, shield groups fortified, conquered strikes intercepted on 5 sectors. Progress, but still early. He looked to the side. A woman with a rebreather mask and a prosthetic hand handed him a data slate. Her name was Elin, a former conquered archivist who'd defected after seeing the purge files with her own eyes. "They've shifted their strategy," she said. "They're not chasing cells anymore." "What are they doing?" "They're targeting memory." He didn't speak, but the fury in his jaw said enough. She continued. "They've begun burning archive worlds, libraries, data cores, Any planet storing pre-ban human history is being labeled contaminated and wiped. He took the slate, hand steady. They think erasing who we were will stop who we're becoming. They've done it before, she said. They'll do it again if we don't hit back. He nodded. Then we give them something they can't delete. Target, Seraphis 4. It was a pristine, conquered archive world, central, defended, pure. At least that's what the public was told. What they didn't know was that beneath Seraphis diplomatic towers sat a vault, not just of conquered records, but of banned culture, music, books, footage, art, stolen from human worlds before they were declared unsafe. The conquered hadn't destroyed it. They'd kept it, hidden it, because deep down they feared something worse than rebellion, remembrance. He knew the risks. Seraphis IV was not a soft target. It was the symbol of conquered control. A strike there wasn't just tactical. It was ideological. But that's why it had to be done. He sat in the ship's drop pod with 5 others. No names, just nods. Beside him was Roan, a demolitions expert once sentenced to execution for refusing to raise a refugee colony. On his other side, Kellen, a former bounty hunter who turned when he discovered his targets weren't criminals. They were human children. Every man and woman in that pod had lost something. Now, they were here to make sure it meant something. The pod dropped in silence, through clouds of orbital mist and into the pale blue light of Seraphis's upper atmosphere. Alarms flared. Conquered radar locked on. The ship shook as ground-based turrets opened fire, but it was a diversion. A second pod had already landed on the far side of the compound, and by the time the Conquered traced the fake trajectory, it was too late. The team breached through the maintenance levels. No firefight, just gas lines rerouted, lights cut, internal doors forced open with old Earth code injectors. The Conquered never expected infiltration like this. They built for brute force attacks, not ghosts. Roan set charges along the lower corridors. "We don't want to blow it," he said. "Just wake the data." "Wake it?" Kellen asked. The commander nodded. "We're not here to destroy the archive." "Then what?" "We're going to release it." He reached the vault's core. It took 30 minutes to bypass security, not because the system was strong, but because the safeguards were ancient. All this time, the Conquered had spent its resources controlling perception, not protection. The vault opened, and the light inside was warm. Footage from Earth before the fall. Crowds cheering at launches. A boy playing guitar on a roof. A mother screaming joyfully as her daughter ran through ocean waves. Books, leather-bound, annotated, burned and preserved. Letters, diaries, broadcasts. The soul of a people packed into digital prisons. And now, free. He activated the core link and connected to the stealth frigate above. "Are we live?" he asked. Elin's voice came through the comms. "Every channel is open." He uploaded everything, not to databases, to people, to civilian networks, underground forums, hacked Conquered satellites. The culture the Conquered tried to hoard became wildfire. Stories, memories, languages, not propaganda, not rebellion. Proof that humanity was more than its scars. The vault glowed, not like a weapon, like a sun. Across the galaxy, the reaction was instant. Non-human children heard Terran lullabies for the first time. Miners in distant colonies read Earth poetry aloud to each other during blackouts. Veterans, long retired, wept watching footage of a planet they were told had been lost to time. The Conquered couldn't contain it. Because how do you silence something that's already in the hearts of millions? Of course, the retaliation came fast. Seraphis IV was bombarded from orbit within an hour of the broadcast. They glassed the surface, turned the towers to ash. But by then, the team was gone. evacuated through underground ports used decades ago during the last war, another piece of history the conquered failed to erase. The commander watched the destruction from orbit. Didn't speak, just stared. Roan stood next to him. "You think it was worth it?" the man answered without looking away. "They buried us under lies. We dug our way out with truth." Phase 1 was complete. Humanity was no longer a rumor. It was a movement. One built not on guns or rage, but on remembrance. Now the conquered faced a new problem. They couldn't kill what had already lived, and they couldn't stop what was no longer afraid. The conquered High Assembly met in emergency lockdown for the first time in a century. They called it a Unified Containment Council. But no one felt unified anymore. The room, once bathed in gold and violet lighting meant to project calm authority, now flickered with red overrides and emergency seals. The great circular hall, once an echo chamber for hollow speeches, was cracked at its seams. Delegates muttered. Security drones hovered in tighter patrols than usual, and at the center, a single word sat unspoken like a corpse on the table. Collapse. Every attempt to rewrite the human resurgence as terrorism had failed. Every drone strike turned into martyrdom. Every planetary lockdown only revealed more secrets. Every system they thought they controlled began to drift toward silence, or worse, open rebellion. But it was worse than just rebellion now. It was division. Whole species within the conquered had started turning on each other. Some demanded peace. Others demanded genocide. Alliances cracked. Trade halted. Colonies refused to send tithe. And beneath it all pulsed a fear they couldn't smother. What if the humans never really needed them? Meanwhile, on the edge of the Harkoon Rift, a war council convened. Not in a station, not in a palace, but on a ship. The Shield of Memory, once a dead hulk of earth steel floating in a junk field, had been rebuilt from scavenged tech and raw necessity. What it lacked in grace, it made up for in truth. It was ugly, scarred, and utterly unstoppable. Inside, the commander paced slowly before a projection of the Conquered's expanding fracture lines. Aylin stood nearby, quiet. She held reports from over 40 systems, civilian protests, rogue Conquered captains defecting, planets declaring neutrality. Kellen was on his second glass of water, but looked like he needed whiskey. Roan leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, scanning the live drone footage coming in from Seraphis survivors who'd escaped the purge. The commander finally spoke. Phase 1 shook the structure. Phase 2 breaks the spine. Roan nodded. We hitting military next? The commander turned, eyes hard. No. That drew everyone's attention. Then what's the next target? Kellen asked. We've exposed their crimes, freed their records, bled them of their narrative. He looked to the stars through the viewport. Now we take one of their core worlds. Silence. Total. Even Roan, the demolitionist who once said, "Peace is the pause between detonations," flinched at that. Core worlds are suicide, Kellen muttered. They're fortified 10 levels deep. No one even gets into orbit without giving up their soul. That's why we don't invade, the commander said. We liberate. Aylin raised her brow. You want to flip one from the inside? He nodded. One of their own. A world fully conquered loyal, full infrastructure, clean economy, propaganda-rooted education. And we burn it? Roan asked. The commander shook his head. No, we make it choose. The target, Caltherin Prime. An inner ring conquered jewel, polished, peaceful, well-fed, utterly blind. A planet raised on the lie that humans had been a violent mistake in galactic evolution. A planet that believed everything the conquered ever fed them. About safety, about superiority, about sanctioned history, To the conquered, Caltheron was a success story. To the commander, it was a mirror that needed cracking. The infiltration began with air, not troops, information. 10 days before boots ever touched soil, the Caltheron planetary stream began to glitch. Not obvious at first, just anomalies. A school lesson interrupted by a child's drawing of a Terran home. A medical database suddenly including Earth physiology. Songs playing on loop from an unregistered audio channel. Songs no one had heard in over 100 years. Songs sung in human languages. And then, the big one. A Concord-approved news broadcast intercepted live. On every screen in every district, the face of the commander appeared. Not masked, not hidden, just him. Scarred, calm, tired, but awake. "Citizens of Caltheron," he said, "you've been told we're extinct. You've been told we were monsters." A pause. "We are not extinct, and we were never monsters." He didn't plead, didn't threaten. He told them the truth, about Earth's betrayal, about the drone wars, about the ban, not for peace, but for control. And then he said the one thing they weren't ready to hear. "We don't want your surrender. We want your understanding." Then he disappeared, and chaos bloomed. On Caltheron Prime, two things happened at once. Protests erupted, in parks, in education districts, in the intergovernment forums. Students demanded access to the archive leak. Workers refused Concord-supplied food capsules. And in a strange twist of irony, they began speaking English. The Concord responded with martial law. They locked down communication nodes, arrested scholars, executed journalists. And still, the SHIELD broadcasts kept breaking through. Because the truth had already been seeded, it lived in whispers now, in graffiti on glass towers, in lullabies hummed by children. That was when the commander made his move. A strike team, embedded for months, activated their mark. They weren't there to kill. They were there to turn the tide. They hijacked a Concord public town hall where citizens were being re-educated through neurofeedback chairs. All Live broadcast to thousands. The commander appeared in person this time. He walked through the chamber, cuffs still dangling from his belt like a joke. The Concord moderator screamed, "You're under arrest!" The commander pointed at the crowd. "Do you see me as a threat?" No one answered. The soldiers hesitated. And in that hesitation, one of them dropped his weapon, then another. It took 5 minutes for the station to fall. No bloodshed. Just rejection. Caltheron Prime flipped without a shot. 3 days later, the Concord revoked the planet's sovereign status, declared it infected, ordered orbital sterilization. But it was too late. By then, Caltheron had gone dark, not because it was erased, because it had joined the fight. Inside the shield of memory, the commander stood before the council again. More faces joined this time. A captain from Caltheron's defense force, a senator who fled the Concord in the night. Even a Concord engineer who leaked blueprints of the capital's drone fleet. The commander looked around the room. They weren't soldiers. They weren't politicians. They were witnesses. And that's what made them dangerous. He said nothing for a long time. Then finally, Phase 3 begins. "What's Phase 3? Roan asked. The commander's voice was calm. "We bring Earth back." The journey back to Earth wasn't fast. It wasn't clean. And it sure as hell wasn't quiet. Because the Concord wasn't going to let it happen. They had held Earth hostage for over a century. Not just its soil, not just its air, but its legacy. It had been marked as toxically unstable in the official records. No-fly zones, memory blackouts, biohazard warnings pumped across the grid like some divine truth. But the lie had already bled. And the people weren't listening anymore. From one edge of the galaxy to the other, Earth had become a rallying cry. Not because it was a paradise, not because it had won, but because it had survived. It still existed. And now, it was time to go back. They called the mission Echo Fire. 3 ships, 1,000 passengers. Not all human, not anymore. Allied species, rogue conquered engineers, archivists, translators, SHIELD sympathizers. Every single one of them had something to return to, even if they'd never been there. The commander stood at the helm of the shield of memory, watching the planet emerge from the black. It looked wrong. Not dead, but hushed. The atmosphere still pulsed. Oceans were intact. Satellites hung like bones in orbit, drifting and silent. The surface was blanketed in a thick layer of electromagnetic fog, not natural, engineered. "Scanning now," Elin said, eyes flicking across the console. "Atmosphere is breathable but layered with static suppression fields. No active Concord beacon. It's been off-grid for over 70 years. Roan grunted behind them. "So no one's watching it?" Kellen shook his head. "No. Worse." The commander finished the thought. "Someone's keeping it hidden." They broke through the fog with old code clearance, junked Concord protocols decrypted during Phase 2. The orbiting satellites didn't fire. The shield of memory landed in silence. There were no alarms, no drones, just wind, real wind, the kind that rolled over green hills, kicked up dust, moved without being told what direction to flow. And for the first time in his life, the commander stepped onto Earth. It wasn't the same. Skyscrapers once bursting with light were now husks, towers split by time and storms. Nature had reclaimed the edges of humanity's greatest monument. Grass crept through pavement. Trees grew through old streets like veins. But this wasn't death. It was rest. They moved slowly through the ruins of what had once been New Geneva, the capital before the fall. Elin documented everything, scanned buildings, logged environmental changes, archived old digital signs frozen in static. Then they found it. The archive citadel. Deep beneath the city, hidden behind radiation warnings, bioseals, false fail-safes. The commander led the breach. Roan cut through the false radiation panel. Kellen bypassed the auto-defenses with Concord-grade overrides. Inside, they found the truth. Rows of cryopods. Thousands. Human. Alive. Suspended. The commander stepped forward, heart pounding harder than it had in years. Each pod had a name, a date, a reason. He turned to Aylin. "What is this?" She checked the terminal. Her fingers trembled. "This was an emergency arc," she whispered. "They didn't evacuate Earth. They hid it. Concord officials staged the collapse and put the population in deep freeze." "Why?" Kellen asked, stepping closer. And Elin found the answer. Not in code, but in an old recording. One file. He pressed play. "This is Counselor Delvain of the Concord Prime Directive. Final message before lockdown. The human race has crossed a threshold. They're not dying. They're evolving. Emotionally, psychologically, they're becoming too unified to control, too resilient. Their trauma isn't breaking them, it's strengthening them. We can't let them spread that to the rest of the galaxy. Earth will be quarantined under false biohazard pretenses. Those who can be preserved will be placed in cryo. The rest will be discarded. We will label them dangerous, unstable, primitive. And in time, they'll be forgotten. It is not genocide. It is containment." The commander didn't blink, didn't breathe. He turned to the others. Their faces were pale. Roan's fists were clenched so tight his prosthetic creaked. Kellen was whispering curses to himself, pacing like a cornered wolf. Elin just shook her head. "They tried to erase us." He nodded. "No," he said quietly. "They buried us. Thought we were seeds." Waking the cryo-sleepers wasn't easy. The systems had degraded. Roan rigged a bypass. Elin rerouted power. Kellen cut through emergency backups, and the pod started to flicker to life, one by one. Old men, women, children, soldiers, civilians, engineers, poets, students, fighters, the lost ones, the forgotten generation. The first to open his eyes looked at the commander without recognition. But then, as the light adjusted, his expression shifted. Awe, the man whispered, voice weak and cracked. Are we free? And the commander, scarred, quiet, steel-eyed, knelt beside him and said, Not yet, but you will be. By the third day, hundreds had woken, and the transmissions began. Footage, live feeds, not just of the archive, not just the counselor's confession, but of the people, the ones Earth had hidden, their voices, their tears, their memories, the truth that the conquered had spent generations trying to kill, now alive and talking back. The conquered responded in full force. A fleet of warships arrived in Earth's orbit, 60 vessels, 6 carriers, 2 siege cruisers, the largest show of military power in decades. They demanded surrender, said Earth was still under quarantine, said the reawakening was in violation of galactic security law. The commander didn't flinch. He opened the global channel, and he said, We don't recognize your authority. You erased our people. You poisoned our history. And now that we remember who we are, you come with guns. You want war? Fine. But know this, you're not fighting just humans anymore. You're fighting the idea that truth matters, that memory lives, that freedom isn't a license, it's a birthright. Then he turned off the comm, and the world, his world, stood with him. They didn't match the conquered in firepower. But they had something else. Hackers embedded in the conquered network. Drones flipped mid-combat by old Earth code injections. AI engineers who'd defected. Allied species who had once watched humanity fall, and now rose to help them fly. The battle wasn't long. It was precise. And by the end of it, the conquered fleet was in flames. But Earth? Earth stood. When the dust settled, the commander stood on the old Capitol building rooftop, the same place where the eradication protocol had been signed in secret over a century ago. He faced the cameras. The galaxy was watching. He didn't give a speech. He just held up an old Earth flag, burnt at the edges, faded from time, but whole, and behind him, thousands of awakened voices sang the old anthem. Not for glory, not for revenge, but for home. In the weeks that followed, the conquered fractured. Species pulled out of the alliance, war tribunals formed, files were leaked, executions ordered, apologies came too late, because the people weren't asking for apologies anymore. They were asking for truth, and it started with a name, one no one ever knew during the rebellion. But now they learned it. Commander Ryan Holt, last survivor of the Garen 6 siege, shield of the Talari girl, first man to walk into chains with dignity and leave with a revolution. His name was etched into statues across 10 planets. But he never stopped moving, never sat on a throne. He just kept walking forward into the next broken place that needed healing. Because he knew something most heroes forget. Legends don't rest. They build.